Hi everyone and welcome to Learning JavaScript Day 1. So JavaScript is one of the newest coding languages out there with Python. And it's a really dynamic coding language that allows us to do a lot of things. So first let's start with a console right here. This console allows us to print things in it and just allows us to see things. So in order to put things in the console, this black thing, you just do console.log and then what you want to print. So we can print hello world. And if you run it, you can see hello world being printed here. So just more of an introduction on JavaScript. JavaScript is one of the main languages of web development along with HTML and CSS. And it just really goes well with HTML and CSS and allows us to work with both of those languages to create a really good website. It can also be used in mobile development too. So let's start with the console.log, hello world. And again, it shows in the console right here. But let's say we wanted to print a value or a number value. We could do 2 plus 2. So now it's going to print the value of 2 plus 2. And if we run it, it's going to give 4 on the console. So now let's start defining some variables. So a variable basically stores a value, and it can be either a string. So this is a string. You usually put quotation marks, and then so that's a string. Or it can be a number, and that's just a number. So a string is usually some words put in quotation marks, and a number is a number. So let's define a variable. We can say let x. Whenever defining a variable, you always have to put let. So we can say let x equal 4. So now we set the value of x equal to 4. And now we can console.log x. So this is going to print the value of x in the console. We can run it, and it's going to give us 4. Now let's set x to 6. We can run it, and now the value of x is 6, as we can see in the console right here. But now, what if we wanted to see 3 more than x? We wanted to see x plus 3. That would be 9. Okay, so that's easy, but what if we wanted to change the value of x? We could try x plus 3 right here, and then we could console.log x. So theoretically, that should give us 9. But you can see it's still giving you 6 right now. So what we have to do is use a type of operator called x plus equals 3. And that's just short form for x is equal to x plus 3. So those are one of the operators. And you can see a list of operators here. So right now we're using the plus equals and adds value to the variable. So now we just added 3 to x, and it'll be console.log x is going to give us 9. And the same thing for minus. We can do x minus equals to 3. So x is first 6, then minus 3, which would give us 3 at the end, and that's 3. Some other operators are multiplied equals. So x multiplied by 3 is equal to 18. So yeah, at the end we have 18. And then there's all these different operators, but it'll take a while to go through all of them. So I'll just go through the most important ones. There's the plus plus increment, which should increase the value of x by 1. So we can do x plus plus, and then console.log x, which should give us 7. 6 plus 1 is 7. The same thing for minus minus. So 6 minus 1 should give us 5. And then percent equals finds the remainder of a variable. So we can do x percent equals 2. So it's going to divide 6 by 2 and then find the remainder. So that should be 0. But let's say we do 4. 6 divided by 4, and the remainder should be 2. So those are just working with operators. And now we can start working with conditional statements. So it's the main source of logic in programming language. And some type of conditional statements are if statements. So it checks if a given condition is true. And then after it executes the command below the if statement. And there's an else if. So if the if statement above is false, then it's going to go to the else. And then it's going to run another if statement here. And then if the statement above is false, if the else if statement is false, then it's going to go to the else statement. And it's going to run whatever is beneath there. So let's try this out. So we can start by writing if. Then we could put some brackets. And if x is equal, and we always have to put two equals in the if statement. So if x is equal to 3, then console.log. So it's going to print something in the console. Works. So let's just take out this console.log right here. And you can see works isn't being printed in the console because x does not equal to 3. So it's not going to print works. But let's say if x is equal to 6, then it's going to print works because whatever, if this statement is true at the top, then whatever is inside these curly brackets will run. So let's change this back to 3. So now this is not going to run. So this is going to be false. And if this if statement is false, then we can write a else if statement that will run if the above statement is false. So we can write else if x is equal, remember to put two equals, else if x is equal to 6, then console. So now it's going to go through this. It's going to check if x is equal to 3, and it's going to return false. So it's not equal to 3. This won't run. Then it's going to go to else if x is equal to 6. And since x is equal to 6, it's going to print works. And now let's change the else if statement to as else if x is equal to 5. So that's going to return false too. And now we can put a final else statement. So basically, if everything above doesn't run, if everything above is false, then we can just do everything here. So else console.log works again. So both of these are going to return false. And if they're both false, then they're just going to run this. And the else statement has no condition since it's being run last, and it's going to print works. And just to double check that this is the works that's running, you can say works, I'm at the end. Yeah, now we know that this one is the one that's running. So after conditional statements, we can go to loops. And I recommend before watching the rest of the video, you can start trying out some conditional statements yourself in Replit. So now let's go to loops. Loops are just used when you want to repeat something. So there's a lot of different types of loops, like the for loop. And they're often loops for a present number of iterations. So you just basically put how many numbers of times you want to repeat it inside the loop, and it's going to repeat that many times for you. So let's start with the for loop. I'm going to comment this out, command /. And with the for loop, the keyword is for. So we just write for. And then we put brackets again, like the if statement. And we always start with I is equal to 0. So I is a variable. We're just defining a variable here. Except in a for loop, you don't have to put let. So we just say I is equal to 0. Then we put colon right here signifies that that line is ending. Then we put I is less, actually we can start with I is equal to 1. That will make more sense in this situation. And we can say I is less than or equal to 5. So this is gonna run until I is less than or equal to 5. Then we can put I plus plus, and remember plus plus just adds I by 1. And now everything under the for loop will run. We can say console.log repeat. Okay, let's look at the structure of a for loop. First, we define a variable here called I. So I is equal to 1. Then it's gonna go through this thing, and this is another conditional statement. It's basically gonna check if I is less than or equal to 5. And if I is less than or equal to 5, it's gonna keep going. So then it's gonna keep going, because at this point, I is still 1. Now it's gonna add I by 1. Remember, I plus plus just adds the variable by 1. So now it's gonna do I plus 1, which is equal to 2. So once it finishes all the commands inside the for loop, then it's gonna add by 1. So now it's gonna be 2. And then after, it's gonna loop around again. And then it's gonna go through the conditional statement, check if I is less than or equal to 5. And if it is, it's gonna add by 1. So then it's gonna become 3. And then it's gonna go until 4. And then it can go until 5 because this conditional statement says if I is less than or equal to 5. And 5 is equal to 5. So then it's going to loop one more time. It's going to add 1, but then it's going to come to this conditional statement, and it's going to say that I is 6 now. So it's more than 5, and it's just not going to run anymore. And that's how we know that it's going to print repeat 5 times. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're just printing repeat 5 times. And you can also just go on Replit yourself and practice more with this. It takes some practice to understand. So just again, defining the variable, conditional statement, checks if I matches this condition. And if it does, it's gonna do everything inside the for loop. And once it's finished, then it's gonna add by 1. So now let's look at a different loop called the while loop. The while loop is mostly based on words. So loops until a set condition is met. So let's do while x is equal to 6. And then we can just put this down here. So for the while loop, we have to put let, and then we define the variable out here. So let's call this I. Let I is equal to 6. And then while I equals 6, do everything inside here. So we can say console.log while. So see if you can find the problem with this loop. You can pause the video and just see if you can find what's going to go wrong with this loop. So it starts with defining x with 6, and it's going to keep running while x is still 6. And x will forever be 6. So if I run this right now, it's actually going to crash this app because it's going to loop forever. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to put, first I'm going to make I equal to 1. Then I'm going to do I plus plus. So once it's done this action, then I is going to increase by 1. And it's going to keep looping again. And it works like the for loop. It starts with 1, then it loops again, becomes 2, becomes 3, just keeps going until it's equal to 6. So we should write until it's less than or equal to 6. Oh, we should probably name these 2 separate variables. Actually, I'm going to comment out this for loop first. Yeah, that'll make it easier. Okay, so now we can see that while is printed 6 times. Because it starts at 1, checks if I is less than or equal to 6, does whatever's inside here, and then adds I by 1. And it just keeps going until I does not meet this condition, which is when it is more than 6. So that's why it loops 6 times.